Well, it's been kind of a sad day because one of my favorite critics died, and I hate the day that you're becoming a critic and one of your favorite critics died that you knew that was very nice to you. And while I didn't know her like the other Calarts staff, Berenice Reynaud did pass away. I mean, even after her like 50-page review at a Cannes Film Festival the year before I won there. So she's really cool, and a lot of her work is feminism, and it's really smart, and there's some female stuff only that if you don't like, you wouldn't like her because in many ways she's a female only anything that can be possibly done by anyone that would be not a man is not possible because she does things that are like leaps of faith so close to her art form that she was a criticism that she could review an entire gallery of films and she'd see them all. And she'd see them all before she saw them, and then she'd see them again. And that had all tied into a feminist film class that I was even let in for half the class was nice of them. And I did think they should have privacy to see things that only women should see in movies intended for what women should see. Even if there's some male directors up there in Realm of the Senses, the feminist eroticism is shown. You can watch it on your own. You feel a little shaky watching it with chicks in the room anyway because it's more siding with what the chick needs. This is Close Up. It's an Iranian film that I said, thanks to Iran, I really don't think we can blame them anymore about the destruction of the Middle East, which was like ruined the minute that like Saddam Hussein even said he was mad at South Park for wanting him dead. And I really think it's like if Trey and Matt had told me to call Bush and tell him to kill Saddam because he's death threatening you guys for making fun of him at all, shows a testament how we will nail him just for that. But our Iranian compassion comes in when I am at the Iranian facilitator to do not what is South Parkian, but do rather what is poetic realism at a postmodern turn of Abbas Kiarostami's Iranian film Close Up. And this is the one that's going to take a second to explain because actually there's three things going on here. There's a detective following the bad guy. And the bad guy is this guy who's claiming to be a film director in Iran that's really famous, almost as famous as Mahasal Nakabov, the character who's imitating him is, but he's not a director and he doesn't understand how hard directors work, isn't taken under task because he seems to be some kind of like lost construction worker, although he might have amnesia. And I'm just going to tell you about a spoiler because the end does come last, but in my book it's the first because it's the best ending where the stunted out, you can still hear that they're about to hug in the stunted out footage wasn't just because the noisemaker was dropping the cane, that you could hear the caner talk in the background that it was planned to go freeze frame before they hugged. Because he did hug him, but he didn't realize that he did try to steal his director status and would have been hanged if it was him. That could have been a courtroom trauma scene that we missed out on when the Iranian government is already plaguing the world with its we illegalize all film here. Big photos of us don't make them as nervous to put an even bigger screen of cinema up. And I got a personal friend, Cam Sohagrana. And he is out so prolific now that he out prolifics me by 20 films. Because I told him to get some Iran assembly in because we want more close ups. And it reminds me of him because I'm like the guy that would pretend to be K.M. Sohag Rana because his films are clean, they're quality, they're crisp. That I have some edges in some big markets is something we'll discuss called after Masterclass is over, and it's called Make Your Own Adventure Story. No, I'm kidding. So I think it's interesting that in Close Up, I would relate to the guy who's stealing the identity because although my films have cost and made more, his have made more, cost less, and he's one of the Iranian stars of cinema that no one realizes he's made. That I'm pretty close to prolific. Can't take it. Already made a poetry Guinness Book of World Records and sonnets. So I'm not going to take the most longest film series as his, and it's these Cinewalla posters that just drive me wild when they say that America's in an anti-American stance if it goes for or against Iran. Iran loves us, dude. And what Obama did for Obama, sorry I said that way, but Obama did a lot for us even when he was just negating that there were even racial tics in people's minds that somehow aren't racist. But anyway, we call this vast cinema of the Americans need to know about movies like Close Up, because actually, one last thing, the Iranian government condemns him for acting like the director, that if the director makes another movie close to the courthouse like he's doing now to record the conversation, we'll get him arrested too. So you don't hear the rest of it because he's like, well, I'm a custom expert and I'll follow the line that says I'll listen to the guy. But that there are a few patriotic toward American movie moments in this is because not only did I pay for a movie like this, that's a hard to combine film for, even from a Criterion standpoint, which has another version of this out, and it's been out of print for years. And this one's a hard one to track down, but worth it, because it's like, wait, if all your labors and pains were you were the director and everybody wanted to be you, you're taking it more as like fandom that the guy's saying is you, and he might even be able to direct some movie that would still put him into a crime that he can't commit now, and he may not be able to direct a better or worse movie depending on how you look at his karma, which is weighed here by like saying the guy next to me is taking my job and I'm doing all the work. Well, he's going to have to go to jail for that. But that's not the scene that they show in the movie. That's the scene we know must have happened, but that it was a little high in conflict at that point. They cut out high conflict stuff. They don't show bombs or bridges blowing up beside each other like they should. They show what makes Iranian kind of classy, that they can sit there, go to the American consulate, or heck, come to America. We send all your kids to college there. And that's why we trust Obama and his relationship with Iran, even if it may not be over oil anyway. This is a close-up film. It's a political masterpiece. Do you sit by and let the guy think he's you, that somehow cast a voodoo spell on you to make the film for you, and you're that broke and need a bump like this and need this film to be yours? Well, that the guy feels pretty bad about it when he tells it from that access, and he's like, I'm sorry, I know you were just a fan that was picking up on directors can now make movies in Iran. So it is kind of sad that he had to go to jail, and I think they hug when he's 30 days out of jail, and there's not even a reel of strip film left, so he strips down the soundtrack and has it buzz out on a fade out pause button. It looks like the whole film got disintegrated, which it did. Which, if it wasn't intentional, it was anyway, because he claimed that ended the best way, that there's ambiguity whether that guy would have become a filmmaker at all. And that it's not about Abbas Kiarostami, but Maslobov of Iran, which I may have pronounced Maklobov, which I may have pronounced that word wrong. But we're moving on to another little-known classic that's hard to get. And this is another postmodern film because it's Puppet Master, and it comes from the Chin Kai-Jiang Jimu relationship in the fifth generation of filmmakers, but from a Taiwan and Thailand and Hong Kong perspective. And these are movies that kind of make Americans feel a little bit easier about how Chinese culture, on the one hand, in the 60s, led a revolution to kill everyone, but in this one, they're not killing everyone. They're just rallying people up for a cause. But it's interesting that these Ho Xiaoxin films are actually organically compounded with Fassbinder, who I mentioned last episode's favorite thing, and that's smoking it all. that Schopenhauer liked weed and legalized it in Amsterdam is true, and that everyone that loves opium is a Thomas de Quincey fan, probably in China, may actually be true by great book theories. That Chinese opium dens in movies are still pretty cool in my book. That one that they turned into a Gangs of New York shit was really, I'm like, I need at least one Chinese woman in this movie to know that this is the Chinese opium den movie that Leonardo DiCaprio takes a hit Ho Xiao Shin style, or that's how real they do shit at NYU that graduate from there. So, Puppet Master, by the way, is this inveritable film. It doesn't have any dimension that compares to it. It's like using black magic to animate the Muppets and then bring out your scary story about why you should conform with the government. And only the puppet masters can tell the kids, adults, everyone alike what divine prophecy is during the reign of the puppet masters, which was when the opium dens met and the puppets came to life to protect their masters. And they said that there's a total sack of about 100 kilos that gets smoked through a straw in an opium den that is his living room with kitchen sink looking all 80s. And remember, this is 93, playing a puppet war that still goes on in China. Who's got the best animatrix automaton puppets? And that they had to animate them with their own movements is kind of witchcrafty because they were animating them to look real impish, like almost like George Méliès's impish. But that they would have all these modes that make the lights turn into things that look like they're opium hallucinating makes one of my films think that if we even tried that on weed, we would be fine. But if we tried that on opium, it's like, do not try this at home. So, yeah, that doesn't make sense about the religion as the opiate of the masses. So, in that one, it sounds bad because everybody knows religion is bad. Religion's like when a bad person that could have been good first does a bad thing, but because he was good first once, is suddenly redeemed by God more as something that God actually preached against if he was Jesus in the flesh. So let's just say this is the legendary film that has a bomb clearance of maybe less of the opium scenes and Flowers of Shanghai, my Ho Xiaoshin director, after even the fifth or sixth generation. Here he is to claim it again, one of the great movies of the 90s, along with Close Up. And I had to get into which one's better, and I'm going Puppet Master for even steaming that illegal stuff that looks like super dank that they've been smoking this opium for years, and it gets the stress off being a minor, and it gets the stress off of having to be in a resolution when we're trying to till our plants, and that they've earned it from America that they will share with Americans if they're in China. But if sometimes those wieldy marks on even Puppet Master are deadly amounts for humans, probably isn't, because they're human too. And, well, one big blast may save you from dying if you're in a state of paralysis. So, what's better? And it's not just a state of paralysis that the opium gives you, but what better to remain illegal that's a vodka on when you're supposed to use it in pain or anxiety bases on when you use it besides. But if you're making a Ho Xiaoshin movie, you better let only Chinese people in, because there's no way they can even charge for that 40-ounce hookah they've got hooked up in Flowers of Shanghai that went through the whole film. That this has about 20 ounces less than opium in the movie as Flowers of Shanghai does rank Flowers of Shanghai a really good, well-able troupe of actors, but the puppet master can't get a hit 3 times in this film. It would have been called, but that's why I animate puppets so good, because I'm a freaking opium stoner. That whimsy is a kind of whimsy revered in this Ozu reverence for poetic realism, which it turns out this buddy movie, who even ditches his lawyer in some kind of Easy Rider move, And then this Disney movie that keeps turning out to be Peking Opera Blues, the same schedule that those air conditioning guys were getting prints of it. But lastly, before I mention something about Berenice Renaud being the greatest feminist film professor, she loved these movies too. It was an old debate which one was better. And that I could use that as a review to set your final enjoyment that I left the class when Jews wanted to discuss it on their own. And that I don't even need to know what the women in that class really liked me because I was the guy that stopped out before I had to be dragged out because it's the chick part of feminism can't be learned by a man anyway, so why even attempt to teach it? Anyway, I just like those movies too, like that Woman Under the Influence movie we were all really like, man, that's Gina Round's pretending she's insane. She must have had some good witnesses to tell her that now she's gone insane, being insane, and how John Cassavetes almost had to take her to the hospital for getting too into the role. Now, that's a good feminist movie because it's still got the gamut of why good actresses have to get crazy sometimes in their film. I mean, look at Angelina Jolie in Girl Interrupted. I mean, that's sick and sinister, and it's a great movie. But in this YouTube masterclass, I wanted to cover one thing about Rainer Werner Fassbinder. And that for as much opium is in Puppet Master, there's about 20 ounces more of weed compared to the 2 pounds of weed you're going to get per day. That I don't know if he had a sack blower, one of those things you can crank with your feet and blow a sack and blow a hit into your mouth because there was a fire roasting of Capricorn of weed under it, and that's how he got his anvil crutches every time he directed a scene, because he had some things wrong with him as a boy, some mental complications, and he's not even thought of in that way, but he is such a atheist that it probably makes him look like he's a spread out of Germany's recreation. But that the only redeemable factor about the rich couple in Fox and his friends, which we'll discuss more later, is that they did spoil him with having a lot of alcohol and weed from his lot of money, and he was able to hang out with the rich. And really, at this point, I'm thinking if Nietzsche was so rich, then why didn't his money protect the Jews he was trying to protect that he almost got killed in Germany and thrown in an insane asylum for not being anti-Semitic? So it was really those propaganda films like Triumph of the Will and Reefer Madness even that seem funny now, but they're such bad filmmakers, those propaganda guys. There needs to be a censorship clause on don't show anything that's bad propaganda. And I don't care. I love, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and I love High Noon and how that's about the blacklist. But there were some guys calling them the Salem witch trials of who's not a commie here and never was. Anyway, Fassbender smoked a lot of weed. In fact, it is said that maybe more than Louis Armstrong, that I've demonstrated smoked the most weed, Rainer Werner Fassbender, for getting 2 pounds a day up that hookah eternal flame under his microphone bot that you actually saw in the Weed Museum or somewhere like that in Germany was his bong, and he was getting more than 2 pounds a day. I think we have discovered that Fassbender needed more weed to get through his anguish on movies he thought he destroyed because he ran out of money. On the day he won the lotto in Fox and his friends, well, guess what? These guys were cruising him for gold digging, and he only had $1 million, and that he supplanted it into their savings fund is cool because those guys were married and wouldn't be able to make it without money anyway. But it's coming from a dark point that says, but that he has a hell of a good time all the way to his death. To martyr for that gay movie is why we don't make martyr game movies, except for every American movie is a martyr game movie because they always get some actor that dies in it. I mean, dies in the movie because they're like suddenly being gay or being like ill with something you need pot for 2 pounds a day will just legendize you eventually between how much that meant to Amsterdam for a while until the 80s. Not a lot of people were coming through like in the early 1895 Schopenhauer ring cycle days. And it's almost unfair to say that you can really get at it. Amsterdam's dark, unholy hotel just by telling them you're unholy. And they'll be able to tell if you're lying, but just tell them you're unholy. Because you have committed sin at all, you're unholy, and in this church to see which sin is not repulsive more than why. And they'll let you out. Say that code word. We had to go through the back door where we're banging on the doors and clusterfucks and nuns were coming the other way, and this hallway just magically opened, and one of those open shut doors that I'm not even going to ask how they have those on the Amsterdam dungeon. But anyway, before this gets too oblivious, Fassbender has my prayers, and he's a good man. He ended with Querelle. Most of his films were about gay things. Berlin and Alexander Plots has one gay kiss that like overshadows the whole movie for not having it, that now it has it for sure. I mentioned that. But I'm going to say this is about the end of class 1 of Masterclass. I'm teaching this class at Harvard and Calarts. And with respect to most of the information being things I learned at film school in undergrad at USC. So hang on, there'll be a masterclass soon. Just remember, if you're looking for who's spent the most on pot, smoked the most pot, look no further than Berlin Alexander Plot's Rainer Werner Fassbinder. That Sam Peckinpah liked pot with alcohol, preferred it that way, but didn't have the German hookup with Amsterdam next door, is probably how they became friends all over the Anne Frank thing that made them enemies because they were thinking they were sissies. But anyway, turns good murder mystery into the anticlimax things. Germany just went back to usual and was slow going, and that we will cover Showa later brings up a point that why I cover Showa later is because I mentioned one thing earlier about Elaine Renee doing a Sorbonne movie. Well, after that, he did Night and Fog, which is supposedly the greatest documentary about the Holocaust that happened with the Jewish race in that light. It's not even as tame as Schindler's List, which isn't tame, but seems tame compared to 30 minutes of just shrieking horror propaganda film that all Jews are being obliterated off the earth. Still, in 1955, had to be reversed to say, oh, it was 1945. And the Americans stopped the war, even though thunderous bombs and multiple attacks on Hitler's life were confirmed. Yeah, I'll save how Show is even better than Night and Fog because it doesn't just revel in it, it goes against every philosophy that stands anyway against it, that the Jews were totally just torn out of their houses and thrown into death camps was pretty much what happened. And I told you the great dictator has that Griffith, Charlie Chaplin going to war. But this is like actually Griffith going to war and wishing he had hired Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards to save the day. And that's all I had to say for the USC Griffith shareholder. Still got it. VFI book going to come out. I'm a critic who's starting to make it. I'm Aaron Sheley. This is my masterclass, and we'll talk later. See you guys later.